Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk um, about the book Alpine Witchery that was published last year in November by Llewellyn, and is a compilation of spells that were revealed in various forms during the witch trials in the Alps between about 1450 and 1800. So it is a historical is based on historical documentation and also gives us insight into what folks back then, and I don't really want to call them witches because many of them were not really witches. Some were. Most of them were just folks doing their, trying to survive medieval times, late medieval times, and the Renaissance, and used witchcraft to help them in their lives. So the book itself, other than the spells themselves, so they are mentioned in there, translated in English, but from a verbatim transcript of the actual court records that can be found in Austria. And what the book also does is it wraps around the court case, around those spells. We know a little bit, or sometimes a lot, about the people involved in the case. And as a podcaster recently put it, it sometimes reads like one of those podcasts, those murder mystery podcasts, because I let them often speak as they were recorded, of course, not made up. The records show what the accused and the witnesses said, and even sometimes what the court recorders were commenting on how they felt about all the procedures in court. So that's the other part of it. A third segment of the book, it's all interwoven though, is what you can do today when you trying to replicate those spells that were mentioned. It's not always easy. They used ingredients that are no longer available. Some of the ingredients are a health hazard. They could be somewhat dangerous if you use them as they did. And some are literally poisonous ingredients. So, but we know the intent of the spells. And so out of that intent, we can usually decipher what we can do today to substitute for what we no longer have, or what would not be recommended to use. And the fourth part, and this is actually the beginning of the book, talks about the sociological framework that those folks lived in back then. And it's probably, I would say, very unique to Austria in many cases, just because of the political landscape, how courts and the government was organized, which is often very different to what we saw at the same time in Italy, in Spain, in England, Scotland, in Germany even, which is so close in many ways to Austria or Scandinavia. So there are some circumstances that were very unique, and we're going to go into that as well. So maybe actually let's start with that. The witch trials in Austria began in the early 1400s. Prior to that, there were a few situations where witches were called out, but mostly because of poisoning situations, so maleficium cases. And the cases themselves were often governed by just local law, often not even written law, just understanding within the community. And because that was also always very unstructured, these cases often ended up in lynchings. So in 1530, the emperor, it was a Habsburg monarch, issued a set of laws, basically, that was designed to cover which crimes warrant a death penalty. And it was a Charles, it was a Constitutio Carolina, and in it we can find a section about witchcraft and what to do if somebody is convicted of performing witchcraft. And that allowed basically the judges and the prosecutor to kind of, in a sense, construct their cases so that they followed a law, which that was new. What was not really in that Constitutio Carolina was how to actually find out if somebody is a witch. It was more like if and when the verdict was said that the person did witchcraft often or is a witch, then these methods of execution have to be used. Heinrich Kramer, also known as Enricus Institoris, the guy who wrote the Witch Hammer or the Malleum Maleficarum, he put together sort of like how to find out about a witch, how to prosecute them, how to torture them, to substantiate, as he thought, the claims. But that did not really set rooted in Austria for another 150 years after it was written, and not everywhere. Interestingly enough, before he wrote The Witch Hammer, Henricus Institoris, or Heinrich Kramer, tried about 50 women in Innsbruck, Austria, in Tyrol, and failed miserably. He incarcerated all the 50 women. He used all kinds of torture methods to get anything out of it, but really they did not respond in a way that he wanted to, and that the trial went nowhere. And he tried to really paint a picture of persons who were nothing but after or were influenced by the devil and did that all because they were in cahoots with the devil. And interestingly enough, the local parish priests were the ones who defended their flock and said, no, 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 our people don't do that. What are you talking about? And it came so far that the husbands of those 50 wives slowly but surely got upset with the whole procedure and with Henrik Kramer, and talked to their local bishop and said, that guy has to go. We cannot guarantee his safety if he doesn't stop doing and set our wives free. What the motivation was really, if it was because they didn't have anyone to do the household, or if they were generally worried about their wives, could be somewhere in that spectrum, but definitely in the end, Institoris had to leave Innsbruck, and then apparently sat down and wrote it all down, and it still wasn't accepted everywhere in Europe. So, but it gave people a framework, and it gave especially people a framework, the judges and so forth, to say, oh, if the devil is involved, then we should rather prosecute and cast a verdict, a death penalty for that witch or person providing witchcraft or performing witchcraft. So that went on for a while, and when it comes to really the Austrian situation is when we look at how the social network in Austria was set up. And it was such that if you were poor, which often meant you were either disabled, an orphan, or a widow, then you had the right, and you were even registered in some communities as having that right, to go from farm to farm and beg for food and for shelter, overnight shelter, if you didn't live in one of the shacks and just in a remote ravine near the town or village. And that was fine. There was enough food for folks in the beginning, and there weren't that many poor people. But then a few things happened. One was Europe was decimated by the plague just before that started, and so many farms were empty. They were not used, and so the harvests were diminished. The food supply was diminished. At the same time, folks who worked with the farmers, like smiths who provided the tools, and also like millers and bakers who would actually take the food and people on the markets. So they were also diminished because of the plague, and so the whole system kind of was already reeling from that. And then wars happened as well. The 100 Years' War, and later on the 30 Years' War. And with that, an immense increase of poor people was noticed. And at some point, the farmers couldn't handle that anymore. They just didn't have enough to provide for that many more poor people, and started to go after the poor. And one of the things the poor did was learning certain folk witchcraft things that they with which they made some coin every now and then. They were invited often by the farmers to make it rain, or to stop the rain, or to help a cow that was giving bloody milk. Only if someone, only when it got too much, when there were too many beggars around, begging for food that the farmers didn't have anymore as much. And by the way, there was also a climate change situation there, so a small ice age. So it was really the perfect storm. And in that time, we see an enormous rise of court cases, verdicts, and interesting enough, also verdicts against men, so not only women. Because many of those folks that came back from the wars were young men who signed up for military duty in their 14, 15 years of age. And so they never learned any trade or to farm. All they knew was how to, wage war and kill people. So they came back and had to fend by begging, and it just all got too much. So that's sort of it was, and that sounds harsh, but it was like that. Apparently, there was a lot of culling of the poor people going on that prompted a good number of trials. So, what were they doing? Why are we talking about witchcraft, performing witchcraft versus witches? There were some witches. There were some, and in the court cases, it is mentioned that they were known as witches, and that's what they did. And one of them, for example, was called in to help a cow that was believed to be cursed. And I want to use that spell actually uh, to illustrate how important it is when you read those cases or any court cases, more so than grimoires, that it is always a very specific situation that in that court procedures was mentioned by the witch or by the person performing witchcraft or by a witness. And so some of the spells can then be reframed, rewritten by you as a practitioner to fit to your situation. In this one here, the which went to the stable because that's where the cow was located, but it lived, and urinated into a bowl, put some salt in there, took a brush, and then sprayed it behind her back into the stable, and said in a litany of things, talking basically to the cow. And so that was written down in the court record because that was the situation that in which that spell was done. Now, if the same witch would have been called to help a child that was believed to be cursed, she would have gone to the house, not to the stable, to the house of where the child lives, did the same thing with the urine and the salt, but probably in the house, which, today maybe you don't want to do that, you want to do that outside of the house. And let's say that the child had some psychological problems, the witch would not have addressed the flesh and bones as it is in that spell that's written down. She would have said something about the mind or the spirit. So the location where you would do the spell, as well as who you address and what ailment you address in the words, you can definitely rewrite to fit that particular situation that you were called into or you are performing witchcraft. That goes pretty much throughout almost all of those cases. Another interesting case that I wanted to mention, and starting with the sociology, is that the poor, to illustrate how the poor were targeted, and others, even in this case, a woman, would go untouched. The case was so Miss Neunecker and Mr. Drexler, they were known to every now and then do witchcraft together, and were tried then and claimed that they were asked by a woman who was a countess von Wasser-Leonberg. She to create bad weather, not for the countess because she wanted her fields to be untouched by the bad weather, but for every other farmer in the area. And the idea they claimed that Wasser-Leonberg did ask them to do that so that she can sell her crops for more money because they knew already about supply and demand, how that works, and so they were asked to make rain and basically drown the fields of the other farmers. So they did that with a very simple spell. They took a staff and basically poked into the water of a puddle. So they probably chanted something. We don't know that. That was not written down in the records, unfortunately. But the situation was that they got the death penalty. They were poor. They got the death penalty. Von Wasser-Leonberg, that countess, she was known that she hired them. She was mentioned, I think, 9 or 10 years earlier in another trial as doing or asking for witchcraft, which was pretty much the same as doing it. She never got even indicted. Nobody, she was extremely rich, may have to say that too. She was not only of noble birth, she was also one of the richest persons in that area at that time. Um, I think an 8 or 9 time widow, and probably suspicious because of that. But money and social status kept her away from being executed. So, but I would like to point out also this very extremely simple spell that pretty much everybody can do, I would say. Um, of course, the intent has to be formulated and strong and all that, and maybe ritualized as well. Um, and if you want to do that, you know, create rain or ask for rain, which in today's climate might be something that is needed every now and then. So you could take a staff and hit the puddle, or in another case, it was a person doing it with two sticks. They had two sticks in the hand and hit the water puddle with. So typical sympathetic witchcraft or spellcraft, where you mimic the sound and how it looks like when raindrops fall into a puddle, and by that um, sort of encourage the weather to build up and produce rain. And so um, what you can do is to not possibly take just random stick, but make yourself a rain stick or little rain sticks. Dedicate them for that particular work. Put some ornaments or carve them in some way that links the staff or those sticks to the rain, and dedicate it to that particular rain-making work. So you can go beyond what they did in a spell as well. Another interesting case that I wanted to talk about is Christoph Gostner zu Sechst. He was also a Tyrolean. The case itself was interesting because it started as a slander case, court case, and the judge sent some court officials to Gostner's house, and in there they found over 60 witchcraft items. 30 or 32 of them were grimoires, little booklets with all kinds of spells in them, and the rest were things like mandrake roots and little vials with spells in them and things like that. So all kinds of witchcraft items. And so to try them for witchcraft. And he could prove, though, to the court that he, first of all, never assumed that he himself can do the craft or the spell. He always invoked Jesus to do that. And in one of them, he actually invokes Jesus and asks him to conjure demons to send after a thief. So he was like, I didn't do anything. I asked the main deity of our faith to do that. We talk about a very staunchly Catholic environment. He also could prove that he always did that. Whatever he did for the community. He did not do any maleficium, nothing bad. And with that, at the end of the 16th century, he got free. He was acquitted because he was doing good stuff. He was using witchcraft, but doing it also, invoking Jesus and not the devil. So that was apparently fine for the Catholic priests and prosecutors and judges. So what's interesting though is that in this one here, in the book, you can read the spells themselves. He the spell to force a thief to bring back the good, or the goods that he stole, um, reads more like a rant. It starts, the first two lines in the spell, they are rhymed in German. Herr Jesu Christ, ich stehe hier auf dem Mist, which means, Lord Jesus Christ, I'm standing here on the pile of dung. And then it just goes into a rant. So it seems that rhyming was not that, and several other incidences like that. The rhyming in the spells was not that important. It was more, it seems, the intent and to really get into it. And in this case, he as I said, invoked Jesus in order to not be, or in does not get into conflict with the church. And so we have to be aware that at that time, even in the very beginning, in the 1400s, folks were Christian. They were no longer pagan. That was the conversion to that was probably 800 years before that. People's understanding of life was Christian. Some of them, we have at least one case in the book, is where the women who did the spell knew that it was, baneful magic, and basically denounced the faith for the duration of the spell, and then went right back into it. So people were aware, but they were not pagan. At the same time, there's a lot of pagan stuff going on in Austria still to this day. I mean, think about Krampus. And I'm going to write a book with, or I'm writing, and folks at Llewellyn are already working with myself and two friends from Austria about the dark half of the year, as it is, as some or number of celebrations in, especially in the Alps, and that's paganism with a very thin veil of Christianity over it, and we just peel that veil away, and it comes through. The paganism comes through. So that, yes, insofar it was still part of life, but they would not have considered themselves pagan, even those that were doing witchcraft. So to wrap that up, and as last point, what I wanted to do is like substitutions very quickly. A lot of spells in the book and back then were related to things that came from the gallows. There is this understanding that in that area where people were hanged and put to death, there's probably people felt already the energy, not particularly the best energy, but for magic, a strong one. And so they used often the splinters from the gallows or from parts of the rope people were hung in, or clothes, or even limbs of people that got hung for witchcraft. And we don't have access to that anymore. And we can be happy about that, that people don't get hung on gallows anymore. But what to do with all those suggestions in the spells about that. And so what you can do is, for example, find out in your area where the gallows might have been, standing. And often it was on, especially in Europe, it was on a hill outside of you didn't want to have that energy in town. So outside of town on a hill for everybody to see from afar that justice is upheld in that area. That you see the dead bodies dangling there. So find out where that is, and then get, like, I have here a rock from where in my hometown in Baden, near Vienna, the gallows was standing. I also have things like these. So the stones are probably buried there already. These are for, like, from the bark of trees. They're old trees. They're probably not particularly present when people got hung, but definitely also absorbing from the soil. And then what I also have is here the soil from around there, which also might still be imbued with the energy of that. What I do with soil when I keep it like this, I bake it, not very hot, but hot enough to kill any organic matter in there, so that it doesn't mold, that it, and nothing grows in there. But in general, that's what it is. So sometimes you have to just do with whatever you can find that is as close to what are suggested in the spells. And I give also suggestions in the book what to do today. Even like a lot of stuff is in there that asks for bones or nails or coffin nails or things like that. And I can give suggestions how to find them, where to buy them, even on the internet. Bones are a little bit pricey, but it's human bones. Animal bones, hopefully you can find yourself. So talking about that quickly, finding stuff yourself. My credo is that you should probably have some witchcraft running sort of in the back of your head all the time, especially if you go out in nature. And then all of a sudden you run into a tree that clearly got struck by lightning, and you can then take that. This one is a piece of oak that got struck by lightning. Protect it with. Sometimes I just walk with a little bag or my foraging backpack through the woods even when I walk the dog and collect things like that, or sap from trees, and all kinds of things, bones that I find. So that's also part of witchcraft, in my opinion, that you walk through life always with that little um, script basically running in your brain. Oh, this, I could use that for my, even if you don't need it for something specific right now, but you can go and collect it in order to use it later. So unfortunately, that's all the time I have for my talk. I hope if you buy the book, you find it interesting, and I hope I can give you some good ideas how to creatively make what folks did 400-600 years ago your own, and integrate that into your witchcraft. With that said, thank you for listening to me. Let's hopefully you do find my book interesting, and hopefully you find also other colleagues of mine presenting their stuff on at LlewellynCon. Have a good rest of the day, and bye for now.